Hi, my name is Alex Williams, founder of the News Stack, and you are listening to the News Stack Analysts podcast. Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Omri Gazit of HPE. In part 1, we discussed the changing role of the CIO, the shift to scaled-out programmable infrastructure, and the role of Eucalyptus and Staccato, two of HPE's most recent acquisitions. Now let's get on to the show. HPE is the sponsor for this week's episode of the New Stack Analysts. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. So I'm curious about your internal development and how that's progressing. You mentioned Docker and using container technologies and such. I'd like to step back a bit and ask about your own API lifecycle management process. I was mentioning this and when I was talking earlier about Capital One, and I was just very impressed with what they're doing. I'm curious in your guys' approach and what that transformation is looking like for you internally.
So here's a good example. We have a group that builds what I would call information services. Really, very sophisticated algorithmic capabilities, things like facial recognition, sentiment analysis, and they had that packaged as a monolithic set of products. That was part of the autonomy set of assets. And one of the really great bright spots in terms of our own transformation internally is how they've been able to go repackage those as an offering called Idle on Demand and make that available to developers. And now, there's a set of about, dozens of APIs that are available to developers, third-party developers, that we will actually go host on our own data centers and allow enterprises to run private versions of those. And that's completely aligned with, with our application platform. So the way that they actually go build that is through a set of Docker containers, and we'll be able to go run those and orchestrate those using our platform. So there's a lot of synergies that are happening here. Some other great examples. We have a tool called Load Runner that many developers are familiar with in terms of driving synthetic load into an application to do performance testing and load testing. Well, of course, we've been modernizing that over the last few years. We have a product called Storm Runner. And Storm Runner now runs as a SaaS product, and it runs in every region that AWS runs in, so that you basically can do simulated load testing either in a region or across regions. And being able to go tie that into our microservices-based application development platform, make that available as part of our CI/CD pipeline is just hugely impactful, because now a developer not only has a platform, they also have a set of tools that are real value add, that really tie into their new modern development workflow. Another great example is Fortify. That's a static and dynamic security analysis tool. We talked about security being such an important imperative for organizations. Well, Fortify basically does static analysis of your code, reasons about your code, and looks for SQL injection attacks and buffer overruns and so on and so forth. At least in languages that still have buffer overruns. At any rate, that set of tools is just remarkably useful for application developers that want to make that part of their CI/CD lifecycle. Let's say when they want to go from staging into production, they want to have an automated run of the Fortify tool set to be able to tell them whether or not this particular application has any security vulnerabilities. by taking all of those assets that HPE software has and really combining them with our application platform, we think that we can generate tons of value.
Excellent. And so I'm curious about, this transformation we're seeing, across the market, where we are starting to see this idea of cloud native infrastructure, right? Cloud native architectures. And I'm curious about how you guys view that and the transformation from virtualized to cloud native infrastructure, where we're talking primarily about containers and how that changes the way we build out applications themselves. What is it for you that differentiates cloud native, and what is your guys' view about open source in that context? Because that's a key part of this.
Yep. So the virtualization wave was really all about helping IT consolidate workloads, and the culmination of that is really what we talk about in the industry as a VM vending machine, right? The idea of having a falling off a log easy way for IT to create an appliance and make that appliance available to to effectively take a bunch of workloads that are running on physical infrastructure or even on VMs and be able to run those, pack those more efficiently per unit hardware. And cloud native is different in terms of where it's driven by. It's not driven primarily by the need to go become ever more efficient. It's driven by the need to become a lot more agile. And it's all about moving to containers as the unit of work instead of VMs as the unit of work. And when you look at cloud native architectures, oftentimes rather than having kind of discrete appliances, you really want to have a fabric where developers can create and deploy applications in a self-service manner. So really the contract moves from with IT to being with developers and DevOps, and the actual artifact that symbolizes the contract, so to speak, is a container image as opposed to a VM image. So we think that is actually a fairly large shift in the industry, and a lot of the work that we're doing with our cloud native platform is really focused on starting from the applications as opposed to bottom up, starting from IT efficiency, and figuring out what is the best kind of abstraction that developers really want to work with and making that available to them.
This is something we talk about quite a bit with companies that kind of use the cloud native moniker. It's something where I always want to ask, what are the very real changes that you're seeing throughout the company as you're kind of adopting some of these new practices and technologies that we kind of put under the umbrella of cloud native? And I don't mean to be kind of vague about this question, but really interested in seeing what it really absolutely changes the way you conduct business.
So when people use Amazon or Azure today, and they basically take their VMs and lift them and ship them and just run them on somebody else's physical infrastructure, we don't call that cloud native. It's far from cloud native, right? Really how we think of cloud native is moving to an architecture where, first of all, components are they're factored in the right way. They talk to each other through APIs. You can independently replace each of the components. We call them microservices in today's parlance, but they're really components. And you can go enhance the capability of that component internally without breaking the APIs that it proffers up to its consumers. And if you look at how Amazon built their set of services, they built them in that same way, where a developer can basically stitch an application by talking to different APIs inside of that system. And most of those APIs are focused on infrastructure, honestly. But that is just a different way of building applications. We oftentimes, the biggest fallacy that comes along with containers is that uneducated customers will say, oh yeah, okay, well, all I need to do is wrap a container around this application. Now it's cloud native. And of course, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? If you, for example, if that particular application, that monolithic application, makes an assumption that only one of it can exist, It takes loss in various ways. It has various architectural assumptions that make it so that only one can live at any one time. If you just put that in an auto-scaling environment where, based on CPU load, it'll go manufacture another one of those things, you've just destroyed the application. You've just brought it down. So, really, cloud native involves a shift in terms of application architecture. It also involves a shift in terms of, what it means to basically streamline the build, test, deploy cycle and make that as automated as possible and make that something that as a developer makes a change, as soon as they check in that code into their Git repository, some CI process gets kicked off that builds the artifact. At the successful conclusion of that, some set of test cases get run. And if and only if those things succeed, will the code actually be deployed? And will that developer be able to go have real-time feedback over what they just did, as opposed to wait for IT to go deploy? So, the changes really are a combination of architectural and process-wise to really get to cloud native.
So you mentioned these shifts in architecture and the way customers and also internally are building and deploying. Is this kind of inherently preparing your cloud platform to be better helping customers adapt to continuous delivery life cycles? And I ask this because continuous delivery is something that we talk about a great deal and see really a huge demand for learning more about, even as more and more people are actually adapting those behaviors. So I'm kind of interested in how it inherently helps.
Oh, absolutely. So every one of the teams that we have that are building the platforms that we sell to customers are actually using internally a CI/CD kind of lifecycle for development. And that means, the people who build OpenStack, who are contributing code to OpenStack every day, the people who are contributing to Cloud Foundry and to our products in the application platform space, they all use this methodology. And it's just incredible to be able to use the tools that you're building every day in order to go build those tools, right? I mean, it's eating your own dog food in the ultimate way. If you look at how OpenStack is built, for example, every code check-in, once it passes the two core reviewer approval, it goes through a stringent set of tests that only if they all pass will that code be automatically merged to the main branch. And we actually run the system for the OpenStack community. And so we've gotten a ton of operational experience on what it means to operate the CI/CD software on top of OpenStack that is used to actually build the OpenStack project. So that's a great example of where we're using those same, that same process shift and going to a much more agile process for building software that in the end powers the transformation that our customers are going through.
Now let's take a quick break before we get back to the second half of the show. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. Now let's get back to the show. So a lot of these technologies that we have traditionally known came out from this wave of efficiency that really emerged with virtualization, and now the challenge really is scale. I'm curious about these efficiencies, these systems that have been built on efficiencies, and these new systems built on scale, and how you balance these two requirements in distributed environments.
It's a fantastic question, and I would say management is, an enormous challenge, right? So take virtualization as a wave. With virtualization, you basically got an order of magnitude increase in the number of workloads, number of VMs that IT had to reason about or manage. And that created a ton of complexity that they had to go deal with. And the old management systems just, weren't going to scale to that. And with container-based workloads, with containerization, you're going to get another order of magnitude. So the management stack really needs to scale to accommodate those numbers. I mean, those are enormous numbers. Anytime you get an order of magnitude increase in something, that means typically that you need to re-architect the core process. And a lot of what we see is that the old world of kind of providing things like performance monitoring, where as soon as you cross a certain threshold, IT gets some alert, and IT needs to go remediate. That model just won't work anymore because there's just too much stuff to manage. Mm-hmm. And so these days we're now seeing much more a move to much more autonomic systems, right? Where the system will sense that there's an increase in load and it will automatically provision new capacity, or the system will sense that an entire physical server is down and will automatically remediate by moving some of the workloads that have run on that server to another server that it knows is healthy. So, the management stack really has to become a lot more sophisticated. And when you actually do need to go reason about things, you really need scalable visualization tools for enterprise managers, the IT that manages, all those applications and all that infrastructure. And we have some very interesting innovation that's going on, both at HP Labs and in the product teams to really go focus on how management gets revolutionized when you go through these successive order of magnitude increases.
So you talk about these autonomic systems, and we're starting to hear more about this. Speaks to the need for self-healing systems.
Yep.
And this surfaces a lot of very complicated issues, such as cluster management, right? And how do you prioritize in a cluster management environment? How do you actually manage this scale, and how do you build out these service discovery environments and these schedulers and such? Are you guys building on any one particular platform? I mean, are you leveraging Kubernetes? Are you looking at Mesosphere? Are you focusing exclusively on Cloud Foundry? What's your guys' view of how how this landscape is evolving, and what you guys are leaning towards, or what you guys are thinking about just universally working across all of them?
Right, that's a great question. So we tend to go follow where our customers are in terms of their journey, because like I said, one of HPE's strengths is really that it's it's very close to its customers. And so far we've seen the predominant interest in terms of the application model tends to be around Cloud Foundry, continues to be there. But we're seeing a lot of interest in the Docker stack, some nascent interest in the Meso stack, growing interest in Kubernetes. We use Kubernetes internally to go orchestrate, basically standing up our own control plane for our application platform. So we really like some of those tools. They're not necessarily optimized for an application developer that works in an enterprise and is moving from a J2EE app server environment, or maybe a .NET environment, and maybe they want to go write in the same languages and frameworks. Maybe they want to write in new frameworks like Node or Ruby or Python or so on. But they're used to having a runtime that manages the life cycle of their application. And going to kind of a more bare bones set of tools is oftentimes very unnerving for them. They also are not really sure what's gonna emerge as successful over time, right? There's just an explosion of innovation in the container management world. And so one of the things that we tend to do with them is that we'll basically focus on a set of abstractions that make sense to them. And then we'll introduce better and better runtimes, so to speak, for those customers to be able to take advantage of as they mature. And for customers that really want to go, to kind of to the metal, so to speak, and use what we call a naked container stack, without any of the bells and whistles, we make those available too. So our cloud native application platform supports Docker already, and we'll continue to support more and more of these offerings. And if a customer wants to go run Mesos as their data center operating system, they want to run heterogeneous workloads that are all containerized on top of a fleet of hardware, we'll absolutely be able to do that for them, and we'll be able to go marry some of these ecosystems. So just because a customer has chosen Mesos as the cluster scheduler doesn't mean that they don't want to write applications as Cloud Foundry microservices, and we'll be able to go make those ecosystems work together. And we're pretty excited about that, and our customers are very excited about that, because right now they're faced with a choice of either or, and they don't really know where to go. And when they talk to a vendor that says, no, it's not an or, it's an and, you can actually go make this particular decision, and we'll work with you to make sure that your investment in this particular ecosystem doesn't go away. They really like to hear that.
So in this world of complex distributed platforms, we hear a lot of people talking about pipelines and the need for pipelines for continuous integration, for continuous development. And these pipelines, though, can become more complex when you start thinking about policy and you start thinking about governance and geographical issues. How do you guys marry, those real fundamental requirements that companies have with this new generation of integrated pipelines that are helping companies continuously deliver applications? I mean, we hear about companies like Apcera who are doing, who have building almost like these meta environments to create some semantics, and so you can adapt the environments themselves. I'm curious on what the context you guys are taking.
At the heart, we work with the largest enterprises, and their environments are all very complex. Right? Very, very rarely do we work with a customer that says, it's all greenfield, baby. We can do net new stuff. That's where we want to focus. That there are absolutely companies like that every day that are born, right? They're called startups, and they're typically born in the age of the cloud, and they can go choose to do what they want to do. But most of our customers have an existing IT set of assets, and they need to figure out how to move those forward in a way that doesn't require them to throw everything away that they've done before. So we do have a very sophisticated set of assets for automating and orchestrating applications that were written in kind of a more traditional way, that use VMs as kind of the unit of execution. And those set of tools are great, and we have a lot of customers that use them successfully. And their question is always, well, we really love your cloud native application platform. How do we actually get there from here? Today we're a customer, say, of Cloud Services Automation, which is a tool that we have today for being able to model an application, a traditional application, into components, and it allows you to go do basically predictable, consistent deployments of those applications on any provider. A provider could be AWS or Azure or OpenStack or VMware or so on. They basically ask, how do we actually, kind of get there from here? And the answer is, one of the things that we feel like we're uniquely situated to do is show them how these scenarios, are crossing over. So, for example, we just worked with a customer that had a large application, and they wanted to go rewrite just different pieces of it. Like, for example, their web front ends. They wanted to add a mobile front end, and they wanted to do that with a microservices architecture. And we said, great, let's go do that. Let's go use the application platform for doing that and get that CI/CD pipeline going for you, so that you can really kind of move at web speed on those capabilities. And they were able to really rewrite that application, the front end in a weekend. I mean, it was just phenomenal to see what kind of speed they got. And of course, going from that to actually being able to go deploy that in production was just another 2 weeks. So just achieved astonishing speed with respect to where they were before. And then we showed them how to basically link that cloud native extension in their model for their existing very sophisticated application so that they could actually go retain that agility of being able to deploy that application, on either a public cloud or in a private cloud, depending on whether that was dev test or production. So these are very concrete ways in which we're trying to help our customers kind of have their old dogs learn new tricks, not by virtue of basically telling them, no, traditional applications are the future, but really teaching them how to build cloud native applications and then showing them how they will link that up with some of their traditional assets. And we see that transformation really as a journey. The very first part of the journey is rewriting pieces of the application and kind of linking them back with the main app. Then the next part of it tends to be focusing on, kind of abstracting different pieces of that main application into APIs, and having the different pieces talk to each other through APIs. And that could be, kind of a many-month journey or maybe even a multi-year journey over time, because those applications tend to be large and very complex. So you can't kind of rewrite them from scratch in a matter of weeks, but that's usually the journey that we see customers taking, as opposed to saying, what we can do is we can just afford to start from scratch. That almost never happens, at least with our customers.
So we've talked about enabling customers to achieve this kind of speed with deployments, build, creating these applications, and really this idea of transformation as a journey. Is there anything that you've heard from customers that customers are asking for that we can kind of see as the next step in this journey? Is there anything that's kind of on the roadmap that you're thinking about right now?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that customers have asked us for is really just make it easy. Today, it's still very much the case that if I want to go stand up my own internal IT capability, I have to go, kind of pull together a set of disaggregated things, hardware and software and tools, and kind of do it all myself. And what they've really consistently asked us for is, can you please just make it turnkey for us? Can you please package that up as an appliance so that I can go deploy that in my data center? And we needed to be able to work with some of the things that we have today, some of those constraints, like it needs to work in my networking environment. It needs to be able to talk to my existing legacy data sources. So we need you to optimize for scenarios where that cloud native appliance can integrate with what I have today. But if you can go build that and make it really super easy for me to get started, get going with that, I will do a ton of, what Gartner calls mode 2 IT with you guys, as opposed to have that mode 2 IT run in AWS's public cloud, because we really actually want to run it internally. Our major impediment is how hard it is today to get all that stuff going. So if there's an absolute thread to what we're doing over the next year, it's really about simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. It's really about streamlining all of this, making it super easy for a customer to fall into what we call the pit of success, with getting going on their transformation journey using a combination of private cloud and public cloud and everything in between.
Well, Omri, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with Ben and I today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Great. And we'll be in touch real soon about where you guys are going next with your own transformation and learning more about who these heroes are out in this new world of the new stack, so to speak.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex.
Ben, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon here on the show.
Definitely. I think we had a great conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys both, and we'll be back again soon. That's it for this week's show. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsor. HPE helps some of the world's largest companies run their IT operations. The company is also making significant investments in the container ecosystem. It recently made an investment in Mesosphere, the maker of the data center operating system that orchestrates containers for both Linux and Windows. You can learn more about HPE at hpe.com. Audio editing and sound design for the Newsstack Analyst podcast is provided by Broken Hours. You can find them at brokenhours.com. Thanks again, and hope to see you back at the show. Bye-bye.